It started with a bark. Not the usual alert bark K9 officer Zeus gave when strangers approached the property, but something sharper. Urgent. Desperate. That one bark shattered the sleepy calm of a warm Friday afternoon in Meadowbrook, a quiet suburban neighborhood where not much ever happened. Officer Daniel Reeds had just poured himself a glass of iced tea on the front porch after a long shift when he heard it, the kind of bark that sent a cold shiver racing down a trained cop's spine. Zeus was up, rigid and blocking the path of a middle-aged mailman who stood frozen with a package in hand, his face shifting from confusion to fear. Zeus's ears were perked forward, body tense, eyes locked on the small cardboard box like it had fangs. If you believe in kindness, second chances, or the incredible loyalty of animals, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Justice on Paws. This story will stay with you long after it ends. Daniel knew Zeus. He had worked with the German Shepherd for 4 years, every single day. Zeus wasn't the kind of dog to bark at butterflies or get riled up over an unfamiliar scent. He was the kind of dog who once tracked a missing toddler through a thunderstorm for 6 hours straight. The kind who stared down an armed fugitive in an alley without flinching. If Zeus was barking like that, something was very wrong. Daniel stepped forward, quickly motioning for the mailman not to move. "Don't go anywhere," he said firmly, then approached the dog slowly. "Zeus," he called, crouching to meet his partner's eyes. The dog didn't budge. His growl was low, like a storm about to break. The mailman, sweating despite the mild weather, tried to explain that it was just a routine delivery. The package wasn't ticking, leaking, or labeled suspiciously. It had been dropped off at the sorting center that morning. He didn't even know who sent it, just another barcode, another porch. But Zeus didn't care about that. His instincts told him something else. And as Daniel reached out, hand trembling slightly, and touched the box, he felt it too. Something wasn't right. The weight was wrong. There was a slight rattle inside, not the kind you'd expect from books or clothes. He pulled his flashlight from his belt and signaled to Zeus, who stepped aside but kept a close, protective stance. Daniel carefully peeled back the tape. The first thing he saw was a layer of bubble wrap and beneath that, a metal case. Cold. Heavy. Locked with a zip tie. Inside the case, tucked into a foam lining, were 5 vials. No labels. No identifiers. Just numbers. And a folded note. Daniel's stomach dropped. He immediately radioed dispatch and requested backup and hazmat, then motioned the mailman to sit down on the porch steps and not move. Zeus stood between them like a sentinel, tail rigid, chest rising with tense breaths. As the investigation unfolded, it came to light that the package was part of a wider network of illegal shipments, experimental drugs being trafficked under the radar. The address on the label was a vacant home, often used as a drop point. But what stunned everyone, including the federal agents who arrived later, was that there had been no leak, no prior intelligence, and no human who sensed anything off. Only Zeus. The days that followed were a blur of interviews, reports, and news coverage. Daniel found himself quietly marveling at the way Zeus had reacted, not with panic, but precision. It wasn't just about instincts. It was about trust. Zeus had seen something no one else had and refused to let the moment pass unnoticed. That bark may have saved lives. Perhaps many. But the story goes deeper. A week after the incident, Daniel received an anonymous letter. It was handwritten, shaky, and unsigned. The writer admitted they had once worked in a lab tied to the distribution ring but had fled when things turned dark. They said the package wasn't meant to explode or poison, it was a test. A delivery to see if they could bypass detection by using modified synthetic compounds that even trained dogs couldn't pick up. But Zeus had sensed it anyway. Somehow, beyond chemistry and training, he knew. What moved Daniel most wasn't just the bravery of his partner, it was what that moment did to the people around him. The mailman, initially shaken, returned 2 days later. He brought treats, a thank you card, and a nervous smile. "I've been delivering mail for 22 years, he said. "I never thought a dog would save my life. He sat on the same step Zeus had blocked him on and stayed for an hour, just petting the dog in silence. Neighbors who had once been wary of having a police dog next door now dropped by with gratitude, stories, and even gifts. One elderly woman tearfully confessed that her late husband had been a handler in Vietnam. Seeing Zeus reminded her of stories she hadn't told in decades. Kids from the local school made drawings of Zeus in capes and badges. The community had been shaken by what could have happened, but more than that, they had been lifted by what didn't. Daniel, a man who had seen the worst of people during his years in service, felt something shift within him too. There were days when the job weighed heavy on his shoulders, too much loss, too much danger, too little thanks. But now, when he looked at Zeus, he didn't just see a partner. He saw hope. Proof that vigilance, heart, and loyalty still mattered. Proof that one good bark at the right time could change the course of lives. One evening, about a month later, Daniel took Zeus back to the porch where it all began. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the quiet street. Zeus lay beside him, eyes soft, ears twitching as kids laughed in the distance. Daniel rubbed behind his ears and whispered, "You didn't just save the day, buddy. You saved something in all of us." Zeus gave a small huff and leaned against his leg. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Let others know what loyalty looks like when it walks on four paws and wears a badge without needing words. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Justice on Paws. Stories like these remind us that sometimes, heroes don't wear capes, they wear fur and answer with a bark when the world needs it most. And somewhere, in a quiet neighborhood that nearly became the site of something tragic, there's a porch where the wind still carries a story. The story of a dog named Zeus, who wouldn't let the mailman leave, because he knew the world needed to stop and listen.